All right, quick heads up here. This is not investment advice. This is just information to get you thinking. Do your own homework, talk to your own advisors, and make sure this kind of deal makes sense for you. We're here to share ideas, not tell you what to do. Cool? Okay, cool.
Matt, we definitely did research. The research came from interactions with thousands of CEOs around the world. I've been privileged to be part of Young Presidents Organization. So I've met thousands of leaders around the world. I've facilitated workshops for thousands of those people on various topics related to leadership within the organization and in their own businesses and in their lives. And along the way, we collected best practices of leaders who had learned how to do things differently. And we've shared those in terms of stories and models at the book, The Buy-in Advantage. So it's absolutely research-based. It's based mostly on U.S. companies, but also global leaders.
And was there a big difference between the way that the successful leaders were leading here in the States as opposed to elsewhere? Or is it similarities?
It is tailored for the culture, but the idea of honoring human beings instead of human doings, of treating people as people, is something that is universal in language, and values alignment is something that's universal, and desire to have an impact is universal. However, it may be tailored for a specific culture, but mostly the same.
Interesting. Can you go into a little bit of what some of these standout companies had? What was it that they were doing that stood out so much more, that they were getting this buy-in, that they were getting the involvement from their employees?
Matt, the first thing we observe is the attitude of the leader. So if the leader believes they have all the answers, buy-in is guaranteed not to occur.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. If the leader thinks they have the answers, then buy-in is done. And those are the leaders who come in with all good intent and say, hey, I've got a great idea. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
And that kills buy-in right out of the box. And so the first is attitudinal. Another one of those attitudes is a agreement and alignment with the belief that we talk about in the book, that all of us are smarter than any of us. And what I mean by that, Matt, is no matter how successful you've been in your amazing real estate career, or I've been in leadership, we both have blind spots. And by definition, we can't see the blind spot. And yet other people can help us see our blind spot. We can help them. And it's the idea that collectively we can come up with much better solutions than any one of us individually. And yet we don't really have a structure that is commonly practiced to doing that without bringing things to a grinding halt, saying, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then debating. And debating is the worst waste of time in meetings and workshops that God's ever created.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad that you went to this point right away with just how ineffective meetings typically are. And we've all been there, where there's the guy in the corner, the extrovert in the meeting, where he's got all of the answers. Somebody else is in the corner who's not talking at all. And what ends up coming out of that meeting is that you have another meeting, right? Just not an effective way to be able to communicate or solve problems. You also mentioned that collectively the team can come together and solve all of these problems together. And you mentioned how bad it is when the leader comes in and says, we need to do it this way. So can you talk a little bit about what you asked me before we started recording, what the meaning of a workshop was to me? And I gave my definition, and I didn't really ever get your definition. So I'm curious what your definition would be for a workshop and how it's different than a meeting.
There's no magic definition that I know of. A workshop generally is a longer form meeting, which is more focused around a specific topic and is structured for collaboration and solutions. A meeting is a shorter form of a workshop. But however, there are techniques that are the same in effective meetings and effective workshops. And if it's okay, I'd like to take a minute and just talk about some of the things we cover in the book.
Yeah.
Here's what we see in effective meetings. People think often Effective meetings are where we come out with a decision, and the leader will often walk out and say, that was a great meeting. And it may have been a great meeting for the leader and a decision may have been made. It doesn't mean it was an effective meeting. It's often just an efficient meeting. And we see so many meetings that are death by updates. Okay, operations, give us an update on what's going on in your area. Thank you very much. Finance and accounting, what's going on in your area? Which is a total waste of time. People can read faster than they can listen to you, and the time should be spent for the collective good, meaning let's apply all this brain power in the room to asking probing questions, identifying patterns, and solving things instead of listening to somebody blather on about what happened last week. Most companies, most organizations don't have a proven format for what a great meeting looks like. So here's what a great meeting looks like. First of all, no surprise, it has a structured agenda, and the data we need ahead of time for the discussions is shared ahead of time. What we know about leaders is about half of people think about things overnight, and a half people will react to things in the moment. So if you're holding a meeting and you pass out data and then say, let's discuss this data, you've already lost half the people. What a waste of time. You'd have to have the same meeting tomorrow to pick up whatever it is they believe to be true. So an agenda that's effective is always accompanied by data ahead of time with very specific questions. I remember going into a meeting at a television station, and very successful television station in their market, and I looked at the agenda, which they had ahead of time, credit to them, and the agenda said budget. The topic was budget. What am I supposed to do with that? If I'm sitting as one of 14 people in the room, what does budget mean? Are you asking me to address a specific question? Are you preparing me for information about what our budgeting process will be? Is this an invitation to ask questions? Is this information? Is this a discussion, or is this a decision? Label it on the agenda. And if it's a discussion or a decision, tell me specifically what it is. If it's information, tell me what to expect. And please put the information in the agenda or attach to the agenda so I can see it ahead of time. So the first most important thing is the pre-work done before a meeting begins. Then when the meeting starts,
Real quick before you dive into that, I'm curious, is this a template maybe that you have in the book where it's the same questions that should be setting up this agenda? So that way the same type of information, depending on whatever the topic is. Yeah, got it. Okay.
what is changing in the agenda is what issues we're discussing.
Yeah, right.
The format of a meeting should be basically the same, and it always begins with questions, clarifications, additions or deletions to the agenda. Did everybody get the agenda? Does it make sense? Any clarifications required? So check in on that. Then go right to expectations.
Got it.
Everybody, please take a minute on your own and consider what would make this meeting a great use of your time. Because you have no idea what's on people's minds. And if you engage people right away in the meeting, they can't hide in the corner. They can't be left thinking about what they have on their to-do list. They can't be left thinking about what they're going to have for lunch. You engage them and you say, all right, what's great look like for this meeting? And you list it out and you'll get 10 or 12 or 14 expectations. And if you see one of those and you write them down so everybody can see them, you honor the expectation. No response necessary unless when you look at the list, there's something you know you won't get to in that meeting. Call it out and just say, hey, we're not going to get to that today. Could we do that in our next meeting? Can we do a one-on-one? Just decide and share with people how you're going to deal with that expectation.
Yeah. And real quick too, I'm curious from the energy in the room, when you're doing this, do you typically get a lot of repeats where somebody might say something and then the next person says the same thing? Are there any rules about what you have to come up with your own idea? You can't just take somebody else's. Is there anything along those lines at all?
Yeah, great question. You know what? If you have the same expectation, you say, yeah, I agree with what she said, but I would also add.
Got it.
No need to say the same expectation twice. If somebody else said it, just double click on it or move on and add your own.
Yep. Got it. Okay. Cool. So,
And
so
then
what,
when you move in, we're always going to have a timekeeper, and there's going to be time allocated for each topic. And if we are in the midst of a really serious discussion and the time runs out, it's up to the group to say, let's extend this, recognizing it's at the expense of something else. What we see in meetings over and over again is sometimes the most important topics are left to last, and then we run out of time. And so it's conscious use of our time as a precious resource that we have. So we're always conscious of, hey, we've allocated this much time for this discussion. If we need to continue it, we can do that later, or we can extend this at the expense of someone else. So time management is also important. And then depending on the size of the group, how large are your meetings typically, Matt? How many people would be there?
I would say that the majority of them, I try to not have any more than about 8 people or so. I've found over the years that typically seems to give enough, but not too much input and ideas. So normally around 8, give or take.
Nice. And here's a question we ask leaders. So if you were having friends or other couples over for a dinner party, how many people can be at the table before more than one conversation naturally occurs? How many people could be at the table?
6?
Yeah, 6 seems to be the answer that comes up most often.
Yeah.
And so what we would observe is if you have more than 6 people, you are well served to break into small groups to discuss whatever there is to be discussed. Because otherwise you're going to leave that person who is more of an introvert off to the side while the extroverts drive the conversation.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure every voice is heard. So we use small group breakouts a lot. And in a small group breakout, you just say, okay, you give them a specific ask. Hey, here's a specific on the budget. I'd like to know what worked well in last year's budgeting and what we might do better. Everybody take a minute on your own, which is the collective genius process outlined in the book. Start with time on your own, then go to a small group and share in groups of 3, 2 or 3, and then come back to the big group. And what you'll find is every voice gets heard. People feel like they're part of the solution or part of the discussion, and you didn't take the time to say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. That's interesting. So you're working in these small groups. Again, if you have 6 people, I'm assuming that you just pair off in groups of 2s.
Teams of
Is there,
threes.
yeah, is there any other structure that you're going after in this initial questionnaire? What's working, what's not working? Is there anything else that you're doing in that stage, or is that stage number 1?
No, that's stage number 1, where you're stating a very clear ask ahead of time. You're identifying intent ahead of time. Is this discussion, information, or decision? And then in the small group breakouts or in the conversation, you've asked very specific questions of people. And there's a lot more detail in the Buy Advantage book about meeting effectiveness, but meetings are the biggest waste of time and one of the biggest opportunities.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So what is the next step once you go through what's working, what's not working? What's the next step to be able to take this to a point where you have some type of an outcome that you can use, or some type of collective
Sure.
information from the 3 or 2 different groups?
Sure. And it's funny you say what's working, what's not working, because we call that instant analysis, which is one of the things you do at the end of every single meeting, whether it's 2 people, 5 people, 20 people. You ask what worked, what didn't work, so you can get feedback on how to make the meeting more effective for the participants. And if that's not done, you've lost a great opportunity to improve effectiveness of the one thing that wastes the most time. So let's talk about decision-making for a second, because that's also outlined in the book. And we believe in this collective genius process that I alluded to before, which begins with answering a question on your own. So you make sure you know your answer before the first extrovert starts blathering on, and everybody responds to that. And 10 minutes later, you realize, I didn't even know what my answer was, and my point was lost minutes ago. And so collective genius process is on your own, small group, and then it's collective big group. And so if we were asking people about a specific thing that we want to solve for, One of the first questions to be asked is if we offer a clearly desired outcome, we want to reduce waste by 20%. The question is, what most companies do is say, we want to reduce waste by 20%. What are your ideas? Let's brainstorm, which is awesome. We would argue it's a waste of time because we're all solving for a different problem and we're all solving with a different criteria set.
Yeah, because
So
you haven't defined
drama,
what wastes you're even referring to, right?
absolutely. So drama-free problem-solving system, one of the chapters in the book says, look, you have the opportunity to identify what is the issue, what is the desired outcome. First of all, what is the desired outcome? Let's say we want to reduce waste 20%. Awesome. The next question is, what are problems or what are challenges to reducing waste? And ask each person to do that on their own. And then if there are a large number of people, break into small groups, come back, list out all the different problems, because there are probably going to be 10 or 12 or 15 things getting in our way that cause us to create waste. And we can, if you just go to the question and then go to answers or solutions, everybody is answering for a different problem. So let's agree to one problem we're trying to address. And the way we do that is weighing the ox. We simply say to people, if there are 12 things listed, we simply say, hey, Matt, you've got 3 votes. Place your 3 votes any way you want. And let's prioritize the first problem we're going to address and just focus the discussion on one problem. The next step is also often overlooked, and that's simply that of criteria. Criteria is simply what elements does a great answer address? What elements does it address? So if we have the problem we're addressing and what a great solution looks like, not what the solution is, just what it looks like, then everybody is brainstorming from a common place. We're all addressing the same thing against the same criteria. So now we repeat the process of on your own, small group, big group. Now we have a number of solutions to choose from that all are about the same problem, all using the same criteria. And then it's a matter of looking for best fit. No discussion necessary. Here are the solutions. We've got 10 of them. They're all awesome. Which one has the best fit given the criteria?
Got it. And when you're looking at the best fit, what types of, I guess, criteria are you looking for to be able to establish what the best fit is? The ease of implementation or the cost of implementation, like those types of things? Is that what?
Yeah. So in the criteria stage, you're talking about it should be easy to implement. It should be simple enough to be understood by everybody. It should be replicable. It should not jeopardize our brand or safety. It should, whatever it is. So those criteria are stated before the solutions are ever generated. And then if everybody is looking at a common set of criteria and addressing one single problem, they're off to the races in creating solutions that meet those criteria. Then we have a list of 10 or 12 or 14 solutions. The question is, which one will most quickly address the problem that we identified, given the criteria we had? No discussion necessary. Thank you very much. Let's just weigh the ox and use our experience to identify which one would get us closest, quickest to our solution. No discussion necessary.
Got it. Got it. And when you're going through this process, is there a way to be able to categorize all of these? I guess maybe you're doing that when you're voting too, where like this is the top solution that we all agreed on based on the votes that were cast for that particular one. And then it probably filters down from there. Is that right?
Yeah. And we give typically 3 or 4 votes so that if you want to put 3 votes against one idea because you feel really strongly about it, great.
Yep.
I was on a call earlier today where we had to make a difficult decision about selecting somebody for a promotion. And there were 2 equally qualified candidates. And we had a panel of 6 executives voting and we voted 3-3. And we decided that if we each had 3 votes, we could better express how strongly we felt about each of these 2 highly qualified candidates that were equal in so many ways. And when we went to cumulative voting, the decision was made very quickly. No discussion.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you, is that the end of the process, or is there more after that?
Oh, great question. Then we need an owner for whatever that solution looks like to flesh out the solution. That should not be done in committee. Just ask a volunteer
Yeah.
to flesh out the solution and come back to us so we can all give you feedback on the solution and then assign owners to implement.
Yep. Yep.
And rate solution, of course, has a measure and has evidence has been completed and describes the activity, etc.
Yep. So have you found that this works for pretty well? You described the employee raise. Have there been instances that this type of framework or process has not worked very well for that particular problem? Or have you found that this pretty well is applicable to pretty well any type of situation that you may be forced to make a decision?
Yeah, it is effective in almost all decisions unless one of two conditions. One is there's an emergency, like a fire in the building. I would not use this process.
Yeah.
I would identify you, Matt, the exit's there. Please lead people to the exit, hold the exit door open, or whatever. The other is that there are certain decisions that an owner wants to reserve for themselves. And when that's the case, because it is game-changing, it's a major investment for our company, it's a decision that will affect us forever, whatever it is, if you want to reserve the decision for yourself, awesome. Go through this process until you get to the voting stage on solutions. And just put up the alternatives and say to people, look, I'm going to make the final decision. I really care about your experience. I care about your ideas, but I'm going to hold the decision for myself. And I don't want to mislead anybody about that. And I value your input. So you just identify that the team is not going to select the decision. You are.
And I'm curious, I'm assuming that you've probably been in the situations where that was the decision of that type of leader. And I'm curious, based on your research, what type of leader do you feel that person is in that situation? Because they're not, get the feeling maybe that they may not necessarily be taking all of the input in from the people that may know exactly what the true challenges are, the people that are on the front lines, the people that are doing it. So I'm just curious if you have any type of input into, if that is your thought process, just think very carefully about that, because you might be alienating some of the input that you could be gaining from, again, the people that probably know better than what you are. So I'm just curious what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, Matt, that's a good question. So one of the principles we lay out in the buy-in advantage is that leaders go last. So you're not going to share your opinion and say, what do you think? You're going to go last, except when it comes to vulnerability. And I'll talk about that in a second. But in answer to the question specifically, there are generally 2 or 3 kinds of decisions that you should retain for yourself. If you're deciding more than 2 or 3 kinds of topics as a leader, then you're probably holding the organization back. And so an example of this is we work with a very talented leader who holds very strongly to certain of his values. And one of his values is about substance abuse and substance use. And the question was, they happen to be in a state where pot was legalized and they're using drug testing for reasons of safety. And they were getting a lot of applicants that they liked, but they were failing the drug tests. So the question was, are we going to change our policy about drug testing or relax our standards at the risk of safety and other issues, or should we maintain the course? What should we do? And that was where the leader said, and appropriately so, I'm going to make this decision. However, I really value what you think, because I want to make sure that I'm considering all options. So they went through this process, and it provided the leader with the benefit of everybody's experience and everybody's thinking. And this idea, this fantasy that there is one right answer is just that. It's a fantasy. There are great answers. They are all different depending on the criteria and depending on the problem you're trying to solve for.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned briefly about if you're making more than 2 to 3 decisions, then I believe that you said that you might be making too many decisions. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little bit more? Because obviously, leaders of companies, they're probably making 100 different decisions every day. So, is there categories that they should be focused in on and only making 2 to 3 decisions in those types of categories? Or I'm curious how you go about breaking down this 2 to 3 decisions is what you should be focused on. Like, what type of criteria go into those decisions that you should be making?
We would argue that leaders have the opportunity to prioritize. In the book, we talk about 3 is greater than 7. And so 3 is greater than 7 means if you have 7 priorities, or if you're making 20 decisions, the rest of the organization, frankly, is not necessary unless you just want millions or AI to be your arms and legs. So the question is, what are the most important decisions to be made that you want to have the final say on? What are those decisions? So, for example, if you are in real estate investing, you might say, I'm going to make the final decision whether or not we write the check for this new piece of property or whether we sell a property. That's awesome. Get other people's input and have some process to go through the analysis. But if you want to maintain that decision, that's great. But if you're making that decision plus what color the carpet is and how we paint the walls when we do TIs, that may be overkill. The decisions you should make would be ones where you have a particular passion or skill. And if you're making all the decisions, other people aren't necessary. And let me give you an example, because sometimes I hear Steve Jobs, he was a micromanager. Steve Jobs was a micromanager, but he was a micromanager about what he knew well, which was simplicity and design. And everything he did was about simplicity and design. Simplicity and design, functionality, obviously, but simplicity and design. And so he was a micromanager about that. But in most other decisions, he would leave it to people who are experts in that area. He might talk to them about criteria. Here are the kinds of things that are important for me to consider, but the decision is up to other people.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm trying to think of different situations that I've been in where we ran into a wall with, actually, I'm curious your perspective on this. A technology project that we were running, I also have a technology company. The client didn't necessarily realize that they had a part of their process where there really wasn't a process per se that was presented or that they would always use. Sometimes it was done this way, sometimes it was done this way. They basically had 20 different ways that they were getting to the same type of result, and they couldn't make a decision on what to move forward with. So I'm curious if you are ever in a situation where you might have a list of things that you should be working on, and you don't necessarily have a defined, this is the one that we should use. Have you ever been in a situation where there was, you needed some way to be able to determine when there wasn't necessarily a defined path to move forward with?
Yeah, absolutely. So your client example is a great one with 20 different ways that they're doing things and all got to the same place. So let me ask you this. What was the desired outcome of all of those processes? How would you define the desired outcome? What did those processes accomplish?
It accomplished, basically, this was a project-based company. So this was their path to be able to finish that particular project. And depending on some variables that were coming in from that project, that's what would determine what direction it would take.
Okay. So I would use the drama-free problem-solving system that is outlined in the book, which basically says, okay, if our desire is to complete projects, our criteria might be timely completion, a system that people can learn pretty quickly. It might be one that we can document easily. It's one that we can train to. It's one that doesn't require special education or software that we don't have. And have the team collectively come up with the criteria that are most important, because only then can we select a process. And we also have to agree that having one process is better than multiple processes. Because if we have multiple processes, It makes it very hard to transfer people, for example, from one project to another because what they know is not what we're doing. So it makes it very hard to scale. If they never want to scale and every single project is bespoke, it's both expensive, cumbersome, and not scalable. So I would lead them through the conversation of what's the criteria of a great process, and then ask them to select elements from the different processes that best fit those criteria. That is drama-free problem solving.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I love this. I call these types of things workshops, right? Again, it's not a meeting. It has a different format to it and a structure that actually gets to results. And again, this way of thinking, I think, is simple enough where every company should be deploying this type of philosophy, at least for larger decisions, at the very least, I feel. So,
And Matt, let's take it up a level. So we're in a competitive environment as an employer, and we are often challenged by believing the myth that money is most important to people. And that is a myth. Is money important? Sure. Is money what attracts people to you? If money is what attracts people to your company, then you're in trouble because they'll leave for money. And so there's an opportunity to match the talent we bring in with our purpose and our values, where our purpose is never about making money. Our purpose is how we change the world. What are we doing to change the world? And if you can't answer that, then it's hard to have people come in aligned with purpose. So money might attract people to be curious about the company, but purpose and values are what will keep the people at a company. And so this myth of money gets reinforced because one of the great lies we talk about in the book is, I left for a better job. And so if we go out and interview leaders, why did the people leave? Oh, they left for a better job, which is code for they got more money. And yet if you look at the research data on people who leave companies, they leave because of their boss. And if you ask, why did they leave? They left because of poor communications or poor leadership. But it's impolite to say that. So we get into this money myth. And one of the major costs that never shows up on your P&L in a company is the cost of turnover. And it is significant. Turnover is not just a financial cost, wasted productivity for time spent training and time spent hiring and time spent retraining, which takes people off their normal job to do this job as well. There's stress in the organization when we don't have enough people to do the work. And so this hidden cost of turnover is enormous. And that's part of the buy-in crisis. And so we encourage leaders in particular to think about what is our compelling purpose. If it's not clear, it's always 4 to 6 words. It's always of the heart. We talk about how to get there in the book and how great companies have found their compelling purpose. And if we can identify values and then use that in our decision-making, in our hiring, in our reviews, and reinforce it all the time, we've lost a major opportunity to pull human potential.
yeah, no, there's a lot to think about there. And obviously every company and every leader has their own ways that they look at things. But I think that's incredibly powerful to be able to put that kind of a lens on that situation. So I love this way of leading things and interacting with people and making decisions together. And it just, to me, it makes so much sense. And I've seen it work firsthand in the workshops that we've done. Kudos to you for putting this book together. And this is fantastic. If people want to learn more about the book or you, or reach out and get a little bit of advice, what would be the best way to do that?
Matt, you'll remember I referred to our 6 earlier, our blind spot as leaders. So one of the things we have in the book in chapter 3 is an assessment of where your organization is now. And you can do that as the leader. You'll just lose all the input of the people who also experience it, and you'll be victim of your own blind spot. So what we recommend is start with the self-assessment in chapter 3, have your team do it on their own, and then compare notes and identify where is the low-hanging fruit we can start working on now. And to make that easy for you, we have a copy of chapter 3 and the assessment available. And buyinbook.com, BUYINBOOK.com. Buyinbook.com has chapter 3 where you can read that analysis. Also has a worksheet on the 45 questions great leaders asked, which is another tool you can use and give you a sample. You can also pre-order the book, and there are bonuses for pre-ordering the book that comes out June the 3rd. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn, Dave Garrison, and we have a weekly newsletter for leaders that's free. You can sign up. So check it out, buyinbook.com, or check us out on LinkedIn.
I love it. And just to clarify too, you said the self-assessment and then give it to your team members and have them take it, and then you can see the low-hanging fruit. Is it obvious to be able to see where the low-hanging fruit is there, or is there a little bit of explanation that should go into that at all, or no?
No explanation. Well, your team members just compare their answers to the assessment, and you'll find through the collective genius process where the low-hanging fruit is and go after it. It costs nothing except for time and intention, and you'll see results from the buying advantage.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And actually, one last question here too. This process can go across all kinds of different verticals, industries. Again, this can be for different departments, sales, marketing, whatever the challenge is that particular department is working on. This works for that.
Absolutely works at department level. It works for boards of directors. It doesn't matter if it's a profit, a nonprofit, educational institution. Our team has implemented the buy-in advantage at land grant universities, at profit organizations, at nonprofits, at startups, New York Stock Exchange companies. So it works, and this is a DIY book. So love for you to work with our firm, but importantly, what we want to do is just put out the, look, here are all the tools. Here, you can do it. Go for it.
Yep. Yeah, love it. I love it. Dave, this is fantastic. I appreciate the time and all of the advice, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to go out and get the book on what day did it come out? June
3rd.
June 3rd.
Buy-in Advantage, available anywhere you get the books, also available on Audible, also available on Kindle.
Beautiful. Excellent. I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.